bother me so much that when I come home, I just am so over everything. So my next tip is finding fabrics that work best for you. For me personally, I find that the fabrics that most often meet my sensory needs include cotton, but only certain types. So think like really thin, soft, flexible cotton, not the really stiff, older cotton. Rayon, lyocell, and sometimes satin or silk. Now, that doesn't mean these are the only fabrics I wear. These are just the fabrics that I try to look out for most when I'm especially looking for clothing that is going to be sensory friendly for me. Now, each of these fabrics all have their own environmental impact surrounding them. However, one thing that I think is really important to mention is that depending on your budget and depending on your circumstances, sometimes you're going to have to get things from fast fashion stores to be able to purchase something that meets your sensory needs, but that also fits your budget, because thrifting is really great and personally I love it. I have found some of the most comfortable pieces of clothing from the thrift store. Absolutely, I cannot recommend enough. If you do have the time to search for what you're looking for potentially multiple times, or just take a little longer to get what you're looking for, but it's not realistic for everyone, and it's not even always realistic for me in the sense of finding what I genuinely am looking for and have a reason to be getting and need. A lot of the time when I go thrifting, it's more so random things that I didn't know I needed, aka I probably didn't need it, but I thrifted it. So I'm usually a little more lenient with what I decide to buy and not buy. Whereas with fast fashion, what I try to do is I try to make my purchases really intentional. So if I know, for example, that I need fancier pants that are also comfortable, so that I have something aside from leggings and sweatpants to wear that also aren't uncomfortable in the way that jeans are or dress pants are, I will go out and specifically look for something like that. This balance of figuring out when you are able to thrift things and when you maybe have looked a lot and you need to just get something that's exactly what you're looking for from a store that fits your budget, whatever that looks like, is really valid, because unfortunately it's a tough thing to find a sensory friendly piece at the thrift store or at a sustainable brand that fits your budget, particularly when you're looking for something specific. If I go to the thrift store and my only goal is to find comfortable pieces that I just feel good wearing, and it could be literally anything from a jumpsuit to a pair of dress pants or I don't know. I've said dress pants so many times, but like, the wide variety of fashion choices there are. If it's anything in between, there's such a huge selection to choose from, which inherently broadens your chance of finding something that you think looks nice and meets the needs you're looking for. But when you're looking for something specific, say you need like a white t-shirt, that's not necessarily going to happen at a thrift store. It might. I went the other week and I found a crisp hoodie that was perfectly white, never been worn, for a great price, but that's definitely not realistic for every time you go. So with that, I wanted to give a few suggestions of brands that I've found that tend to have more sensory friendly clothing options, even though that's not something they're specifically trying to cater towards. Keep in mind these brands are fast fashion, but if you need something more urgently or specific, or if thrifting isn't accessible to you for whatever reason, these are a few brands that I can't say I stand behind ethically or sustainably. But to find specific sensory friendly pieces, these are a few places I have found some really great things. And they are Old Navy, American Eagle, and sometimes TJ Maxx. American Eagle I specifically find helpful for the type of materials that they use. They tend to be extremely soft, often made out of things like viscose and rayon. And Old Navy I find is more helpful for when I am looking for dressier things that I still want to be comfortable. Old Navy has a few pairs of pants that I would say are a little unconventional from what you would normally think of when looking for trousers, I guess. Just those pants that kind of walk the line between a casual everyday pant and a professional setting like business pant. And I say unconventional because my favorite pair of pants from there, for example, they're called the Power Soft High Rise Legging, wide leg legging, I believe. And they're technically made out of like what you consider a legging type of material, but it's a thicker legging material, and also with the wide leg design, as well as there's pleats on the pants, it brings it to be a little more elevated, at least in my opinion. So it helps when you want to have more of an outfit instead of wearing clothing. Like, I feel like to me there's a difference between just throwing on clothes versus like putting together an outfit. And with these pants in the winter especially, I'm constantly feeling like I'm putting together an outfit. And they even work for me in my job setting. They might not work for like super fancy offices. I have no idea. But for me personally, they work for that as well, which I really appreciate. Okay, so to get into the question portion of this episode, one of the first questions I was asked is, how does thrifting differentiate between shopping at more conventional stores when it comes to finding sensory-friendly clothing? So as already made clear, I love thrifting for the sustainability aspect, for the affordability aspect, but also to answer this question, I know many people might find this as a downside, but for me personally, the fact that the clothing I thrift is worn in, whether it's a little or a lot, is really helpful, because then I'm able to know what that piece is going to feel like over time, because most likely it's going to feel about how I got it when I got it from the thrift store. And that saves a lot of stress and a lot of worry, because a lot of the time, part of my worry with things I buy from new stores is, how are they going to wear and how are they going to end up feeling after they've been washed 10 times, 50 times, 100 times. So it leaves out the guessing game of trying to know whether this will still work for me after a few weeks of washing and wear. Another benefit I find while I'm shopping at a thrift store instead of at a big box store is it encourages me to kind of venture out and maybe try some things that I wouldn't usually, or I would not get from a fast fashion store, because I know that it would be wasteful not only to my budget but also to the planet for me to try. Whereas if it's from a thrift store, for example, I have these pair of pink dress pants that I really like. They're super pretty, but they're definitely not the most sensory friendly. So the fact that I thrifted them for under $10, I think they're around like $5, is really, really great, because then I know that price per wear, I'm still getting quite a bit of use out of them. And even if I'm only wearing them maybe like a few times a month in the warmer seasons, because for me, the specific material they are, I know I prefer to wear in the summertime, whereas when it's colder, I can sort of notice it on my legs more, so I try to stay away from that. But with that price point, I can decide, yes, I'll still wear them enough that it makes sense for the budget that I have, but also for the amount of use that I'm going to get out of them. I know that a lot of thrift stores don't have change rooms now, which is definitely a massive barrier, and I really wish they would bring them back. But if you're able to, what I do is I wear clothes that are very easy to try things on over top of. So for example, leggings, just a tighter shirt, things like that. And I'll go and find a little corner in the store and try things on. And employees have seen me do this many times and they don't seem to mind, as long as you put all of the things back where you got it from, because I will usually be trying on quite a lot of things. And another way I make this process more enjoyable is definitely bringing friends, making it a fun experience, and also bringing things that you know are helpful when you go shopping in the first place. So for example, if I know I'm going on a busier day, I'll bring loops, which are just these earplugs that I have, and they're also really helpful. But I will usually try to go on a day and time that it's not as busy. It just, that might not be available for everyone because I'm in school. It's a very flexible schedule most of the time, so I can do that a lot, which is very, very amazing, and I'm so grateful to have that option. But even if you have to go where it's maybe a little busier, just bringing things that you know will be helpful to make that experience less overwhelming is really great. I also know for me, getting a cart and just having a place to put things so that I'm not carrying things while I'm also holding things on my arms. I used to go thrifting without carts, and how I would judge if it's a good thrift haul, if my arm is hurting by the end of it, it was a good trip. But it doesn't have to be like that to still be a fun, successful time. This next question that someone asked on my Instagram is, how do you feel about trying on clothing in store? Now, I'm going to answer this specifically regarding fast fashion and big retailing stores because I feel like I've already talked a lot about the thrifting aspect of this. I used to love trying clothing on in store. It would be a whole fashion show and it was really fun, but the past few years I've noticed quite a shift. With this process of unmasking that I mentioned earlier in the episode, I haven't really been able to pick and choose the ways it has presented itself. I sort of just have to notice it and then embrace it as much as I can, or adjust myself accordingly to allow space for these new needs that my body is bringing to the forefront of my attention. So with trying on clothing in a store, there are a few things I've noticed. The process of trying on and taking off a numerous amount of clothes in itself is a physical feeling that gets overwhelming for me. It always hits at different times, but most commonly it's once I've put on my clothing that I came to the store with and I'm out in the store again that I realize how overstimulating that whole process was. The music will just feel much louder, the lights feel that much brighter, and decisions of what to purchase become that much more challenging. I think one thing that is really important is listening to my body to know when trying on something in a store maybe won't work out too well. And when I have more space in my cup, or more spoons, if you will, to do so, then I will take that time to try it on in store. So if I go into a store one day and I know it's a day where trying things on just is not going to be a good idea, but I find something that I'm around 85% sure that will fit and will be exactly what I was looking for or needed, I will take it home and try it on in the comfort of my own space when I have the ability to do so. Because if I know I'm already super overstimulated and overwhelmed, going into a change room to try and make a decision is not going to be any help. And this leads me into the next question, which is, what advice would you give retail stores to be more inclusive for people with sensitivity issues? And I would say to that, have a good return policy and procedure for starters. Taking away that fear of, I only have this amount of time to figure out if I'm sure about something, is so incredibly helpful. One of the things that I do really like about American Eagle is their return policy is wild. You can go back anytime and return it as long as it's new and has the tags on it, which is so helpful because sometimes I really do need a while to figure out if something is going to work for me. So having that option is very helpful. The next thing I would say is the lighting in the change rooms so much determines my experience. If there's those really bright fluorescent overhead lights in the change room, they're like the blue-white type of light bulb, I'm going to be in and out of there as fast as humanly possible because that is like my least favorite type of lighting. But even worse than that, if there's lights flickering all the time, I probably won't even be able to use the change room. So trying to have lighting that's less harsh is really helpful. I definitely don't love the fact that Aritzia doesn't have mirrors in their change rooms by any means, but their lighting specifically, nothing else, but their lighting in most stores I've been into, I've only been to Aritzia to try on stuff like twice, but those 2 times, it's been so ambient and cozy and just really great. But on the other hand, they will still have their music absolutely blasting, which is my next point. I do not understand why stores have to have their music absolutely blaring. I understand from a marketing perspective, I've been told that something about blasting hyper pop in stores disorients the customers and tricks them into buying more than they would have. However, can we just maybe put accessibility before capitalism? Shocking idea. I can hear CEOs of companies laughing right now, but at least in the change room area, having that break, having that space where you can actually be with your thoughts and figure out if something is good for you is so helpful. And I don't